Today, I think our primary topic is going to be around Claude Code and our experience working with it. We've talked about it a few times in the past, but I think we've just got more things to talk about now. So we'll talk about that. And before we get into the topics, I just want to remind everyone that we are brought to you by Fireside FM. If you're looking for a podcast host, I think they're audio only right now, but they've been around since 2016. That's where our audio version of this is hosted. There'll be a link in the show notes. Check it out. And let's go ahead and dive in.
This podcast is brought to you by Fireside.fm. Podcast hosting by podcasters for podcasters. Now on to the episode.
I know, Baird, you've been working, you work day to day on code more than I do. And so your experience with Claude Code is I guess you've learned more, or you just have a lot more experience recently than I do. And I know we talked probably last week, I think it was, about, you're seeing some pretty cool stuff. So why don't we go ahead and just kind of dive in there, and you can start with whatever you think is the thing you want to share first.
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, it's one of those things where, I use Windsurf pretty exclusively. I do some work in Claude directly and stuff like that. But for a bit there, Windsurf actually had a whole issue with Anthropic because of the potential merger with OpenAI. So Claude actually got pulled out of Windsurf. And then when they finally brought it back, when they ended up getting bought by Cognition, they actually are charging double for the usage for Claude than every other model. And Claude is, in my opinion, better at coding than pretty much everything else I've used. I used GPT 4.1 for quite a while, because that was 0.25% of a credit. And, it did okay, but it wasn't quite as intuitive as my experience with Claude. And so over the last couple of weeks, I just decided, you know what, I'm going to pull Claude into Windsurf. So I still have the, autocomplete, because the autocomplete actually works really well in an IDE like this. When you take control, it can still help speed you up without losing that. I think you might be able to do it for free, but I'm not completely sure. I also have the founders price for Windsurf, so I'm paying $10 a month. So I'm I don't want to cancel it yet, just to kind of see how this works. But yeah, so I brought Claude Code in. It has the extension or plugin for Windsurf, so I'm running that, and I'm essentially using it the same way that I used Windsurf, or how people use cursors, agent in it. And I pull the terminal out, put it up kind of on the side, just like I do with Windsurf, and then just kind of run it in the same way. And the mechanics aren't radically different. And I know a lot of people are using it, so I'm probably just catching up on it, but it's been really interesting. The biggest thing I've noticed, and I haven't used cursors, so I don't know if it's exactly the same, but I don't think so from the research I've done, is just it uses a to-do list religiously, which is really interesting to me, because it actually, where I run into those endless loops with other agents, it tends to, because it has that to-do list, it does a really good job of keeping on task, and you can point it back to it, and it remembers what it was doing with better accuracy than I've had with other bots at this point. And, when you couple that with the quality of Claude, it's just been a really interesting experience to see how much more I'm getting done right now. And it's actually there's still the, hey, you're doing it wrong, we have to start over and, do all that type of stuff. But that's less frequent than it used to be with the other bots that I've used.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's cool. And it sounds like what you just described there is what, I've been doing a little bit with Cursor as well, which is using the Claude Code plugin, because, for those of you who don't know, I'd be surprised if you're watching this show if you don't, but just in case, Cursor and Windsurf, both, they're built on top of VS Code. And so like VS Code, they've got the terminals. So the way you can run Claude Code is you can, there's the extension or plugin, like you said.
Yeah.
But even without that, you can just run it right in the terminal. And I think, at least in Cursor's case, I noticed that it's oh, well, we've got an extension or a plugin or whatever.
Yeah. Yep.
And so it recognizes that. But honestly, I don't know what that's even doing. I just know that it's a thing.
Yeah. What that does, and it's kind of clunky right now, that is one of the pieces that isn't as refined as everything else that I've seen, is that it gives context. So the plugin actually gets fed context from your Windsurf or Cursor terminal. So like it knows
sure.
what file you're in, and it can actually get past, like, you can highlight
that
data.
explains something I just saw today.
Yeah, so that's the biggest thing. The rest of it, I mean, yeah, you could just spin up a terminal in it. You could spin up a terminal out of it. You'll still get all the benefits of like the coding, but you do get that context like by default if you're using it with the plugin. So I've noticed though that it disconnects quite frequently. So it's like it'll be working and then it'll stop working. And I still, out of habit and just to make sure, I give it like the paths to the components or the pages or whatever that I wanted to work on just anyway to make sure that it actually knows what I'm talking about. But
which is funny because that's something that I was doing, like even when I was using Cursor's agent and not Claude, like we just described. There's a way, and I assume I've used Windsurf a little bit, but not a lot, and I forget how similar they are in these regards. But like in Cursor, at least, you could, mention a file, or you could like right click on the file or add it in to your chat. And I still found myself constantly having to be like, no, I mean this file, like, and just like put in the path in the text. And I did notice, so I just happened to be working on something this morning where I was using this whole setup that we talked about. And back to the extension, I noticed at the bottom of my terminal window that it said something about the file I was on, and I was like, oh, that's interesting. But it didn't even cross my mind like how it knew that. But yeah, there you go. It's the extension or the plugin. I don't know why I keep saying extension.
I think, are they called extensions?
I don't even know.
A good
We're
point.
probably just like confusing
Semantics.
the wrong thing either way. Yeah, exactly. I think everyone understands what it means. But
I would hope so.
But yeah. There's another point I had there, but I think one question I have for you, just because you are writing code day to day where I don't do that still, like how much of a production gain have you seen from going to this Claude Code in Windsurf versus just having Windsurf?
Yeah, I mean, what I've noticed is like when I would try to have it, and one of the things I've been doing over the last couple of weeks is doing a lot of like tool building for internal work stuff that I'm building. And it's more like prototypes than it is I'm like fully building production stuff. But it's kind of at work, we're trying to do a bunch of new business stuff, and we're trying to do a bunch of like integration with AI in different places and being able to manage all this data and act on this data. And so out of curiosity, I was like, let's just start generating this stuff. And so like I've really tried to get into the habit of like, because are you familiar with, I know you know about Claude MD files, but are you familiar with like how you can nest them? So like you can put them in the folders where you're working and give more like specialized context?
Sort of, but yeah, for the benefit of our listeners and viewers, let's go ahead and talk through it.
Yeah, so essentially, like as Claude Code works on your files, it will look in your root directory, find a Claude MD, and that's usually a good place to put in like the general, like this is the technology you're using, these are the rules that you have in place, like kind of the overarching context for your project. But if you're like building a new feature and you create like a directory called, source/feature, you can then put a Claude Code in there and describe like what you want that feature to do. And like you don't want to put the overarching context in there because it gets picked up as Claude Code goes. It goes recursively through your folders that you're working on to pick it all up. But what you can do is give it a to-do list in there, like your own to-do list, and say like, I want to build this, like give it all the detail. You can give it references where you want it to go, like research things if you need to. You give the overarching kind of description. And then you just kind of say, look in this folder, grab the Claude MD and start working on it. And it'll go out, grab that. And it essentially picks up your to-dos, kind of changes them a little bit to kind of fit its mental model. But essentially like just maps that. It'll ask you like, do you want to start with, a certain one, or do you want to work through sequentially? And it's cool because you also then have the options of, if you want to make sure you're doing it right, you can just be like, okay, let's go. And every time it's making a change, like, after it creates the plan, it'll start making the changes. And you can like approve it each step. You'd be like, okay, yep, put that in. Or if you're like, I don't really care if this is like fully fine-tuned right now, I just want it to build something for me to get started with, you can just say
maybe a prototype or something. Yeah.
Exactly. Or just like something that's not super important, or like in my case,
you can change it later. You're not too worried about it. Yep.
And it's like, it's internal facing, not going into production for mass usage. You then can just be like, okay, just do it, tell it to stop asking you for permission, and then it'll go through and just build the whole thing. And kind of coming back around to what we were talking about was like, where I've seen the most gains is the last couple of days, especially. I've had stuff that I just didn't have a time to like babysit going through it. And I just wanted to kind of see where it got to. And it's built like 2 full like dashboards for me that are pretty well built, that it did without me like touching anything. Like there's definitely still not like I would leave the code as is and walk away. Like I still have to go in, and as I'm, testing it and seeing stuff, I'm like, okay, we got to tweak this or that. But yeah, like figuring out the whole context at the different levels and like giving it those to-do lists at those levels has made it so, and like, again, you might be able to do it in Windsurf, but every time I've tried the Windsurf agent to like be autonomous and go that far, I've never had success, In Claude Code, it was like, I didn't have to stretch to get it to be doing things that were super productive, super quickly. So it's been interesting.
Yeah, that's really cool. I mean, I forget if I talked about it on the show or not, or if that was just a separate conversation. But what I had been doing for a while, this was even before I introduced Claude Code into my workflow, with just Cursor, is I would, have a to-do list, but it was just in the root of my Rails app.
Yep.
And I would kind of say, okay, we're going to work on this now. And I would, it was definitely not as smart as what this is. And that's really, it sounds like a really good way to do it. I'm curious. So I have thoughts on this, but I'm curious just for you, and just again, share with the listener, like, how do you go about getting those to-do list files to begin with before you start? I assume you got an idea in mind, but are you planning with Claude or, the LLM ahead of time and creating those?
Yeah. You can do both. Right now, I've just been kind of testing out, like in my head, I just have been giving it relatively simple instructions of like the stuff it needs to do. But there definitely is, and I have actually worked through with Claude Code to say like, let's evaluate what we already have and then figure out like how we can proceed, or like you can have a conversation directly in it. So that's the piece that isn't readily inherent about it, is like you can actually ask it questions and have it go give you answers on your code base based off of, whatever you want it to do. And you can have it like, give me a detailed list. Like, what are the priorities of how we can approach this and stuff like that. And it can then, and this is the interesting part about that, which again, like I haven't done a ton with, but I'm glad you brought that up, is, if you go out to Claude, you go out to ChatGPT, the interfaces themselves, like you can do it. And like I've had a lot of success with Claude planning stuff there. But what's really cool about doing it in Claude Code is that it's in your editor. So it can look at all of your files and can be like, yeah, I see we're doing it this way, so we'll continue to do this way. And so I think there's definitely some potential there that I want to push on to like do more of those planning pieces and creating to-do lists with Claude's help versus just like me coming up with stuff off the top of my head.
Yep. Yeah, because I would imagine if you do it that way with Claude, then it would probably just know to, okay, we're talking about putting something in this directory like you were talking about. So let's put the to-do list file for that here, and then the other one's here and there, versus, what I was talking about with my old workflow, which was talk to the LLM in the web browser or in the desktop app or whatever, but not inside of Claude Code or even inside of Cursor in that a lot of these cases, and then come up with a PRD or a user story and then throw that in. But then that, like you said a minute ago, like that didn't have the context of the app. It wasn't thinking about that stuff. It was just all the, as we've talked about before, it's kind of like the average planning. Like this is what the average thing has done to build this sort of thing out. And so that's really cool to just think about that part of it, that like you can plan with your app's scope in mind.
Well, and that's another, I think, huge thing to Claude Code. And this is versus like a Lovable or a V0 or whatever, is like, if you already have a code base, or if like you have an opinion at all, and you don't have to start with your own code base. It can be like you go in, you start modifying things, and then you have Claude Code come in and actually be like, evaluate how this has been written and create, your Claude MD that actually like puts in those rules so you can keep consistency, whether it's code consistency, design consistency, like whatever it is, where like, a V0 or a Lovable, you start from the bot spits all this stuff out. Mm-hmm. Hopefully it's consistent. You never know. And I think it's getting a lot better, but then it's like, you have no real control over that. Like you don't have your opinion. You don't have your style, which is fine for somebody that doesn't code, that doesn't care,
Right.
But this is kind of like almost and this actually kind of leads to another thing I saw that I really liked about the whole vibe coding thing, is that like, it's less vibe coding when you do it the way we're talking about here, because the way I heard it was like, if you know what you're doing, you're not actually vibe coding. And like, so it's really kind of like, you're just using a tool versus like, you're working off of vibes. You actually know what you're doing. You're actually like directing it in the right way versus just being like, build me an app, And so it's an interesting kind of shift in it. And I find, vibe coding works more for like people like us when we're prototyping, when we're like trying to push into things that we don't know as much about. And like, we're trying to figure out without having a fully formed idea. But once you like get into a production day, like day-to-day routine, it isn't vibes. You're not just like leading, like letting it lead. You're like giving it the requirements and then having it go do the work for you. More like we've talked about before, like an intern versus like it's actually doing the work instead of you because you don't know what you're doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good point. It makes me think of a lot of things about just like how I like the vibe coding in its, what it's meant to be, or what that definition actually means.
Yeah.
From a standpoint of, I can build an app in 5 minutes or 10 minutes or whatever it is to get that green field, feeling out of the way. I'm not blocked by that. And I can instantly see, not instantly, but I can quickly see, okay, does this make sense? Or, it's like a planning mechanism. It's a prototype, but also planning. Like, does it even make sense? What would that even look like? Even at like
for sure,
quick building sorts of thing. And then you can throw it away like almost instantly and go back.
Yeah.
And that's something that I've seen several people on X Twitter talk about, that, they're building in public, and they talk about how they can just like build something and then they rebuild it the next day.
Yeah. Yep.
Which is like a cardinal sin in software development usually,
sure,
to rebuild things. And obviously once you get in production, you're also not going to do that.
For sure.
But it's you can iterate so quickly. It's kind of nice to be able to do that. But yeah, to your point, like this, what we're talking about here is not the same kind of vibe coding. And but we don't want it to be. We want to get the benefit of using AI, but we know enough that it would be kind of silly to not use our expertise with software development to help us.
Yeah. The other reference I've heard about vibe coding, which in this context I think is absolutely true, is that vibe coding is essentially legacy code. It's code that gets put in your code base. Yes, I saw that too.
In fact, I marked a tweet to talk about, so maybe we saw the same thing. I don't know.
No, that was hilarious. That was actually the same article where they kind of said, like, if you know what you're doing, it's not actually vibe coding. But yeah, it's totally the more you have code generated for you that you don't understand and don't take the time to understand, it is legacy code, because it's the same thing. You come into an app, you don't know what's going on with it because you didn't write it, and it just sits there and nobody wants to touch it. So it's an interesting concept.
Yeah, that reminds me too. I should look it up here quick. But it's related to it. Let me just see if I can find it quick. But so DHH, he's the creator of Rails. I just happened to see a tweet from him today about AI coding, and I also saw that they have a podcast episode out recently. Let me see if I can find it quick. Otherwise, we don't need to spend the time. But I know that 37 Signals is not. They're definitely not doing a whole lot with it. I don't know all the details. I haven't listened to their podcast episode yet, but and shoot, it looks like I didn't save it, so I might not be able to find it. But I wish I remember what it was, because the way he said it, what he was basically covering, I remember, was he was talking about the fact that when you are using AI to try and vibe code, essentially, and it just keeps going in that loop that we've talked about, I think probably in our first episode around, it's not, you can't just rely on it to get everything done.
Yeah.
He was just, I wish I could remember the way he worded it, because it made a lot of sense. It's like a black hole, essentially, is what he was getting at. Like, you could have spent that 30 minutes doing something productive and actually learning something versus trying to keep over and over ask the AI to fix it.
Yep.
And that's something that, I do less and less, because I have realized that it's not going to fix it. When the times when I would run into that was mostly because I was curious to see, not because I was like if I was doing that day to day, I would have probably learned way faster. Like, that's just not going to happen, and there's certain boundaries which we know now. Yeah. But it was a good reminder of that sort of thing, and kind of goes hand in hand with what you just talked about, the legacy code.
Yeah. No, and I agree completely with that. I find I let it try like once or twice with an error, because if it does it right away and it does it well, it's something that you don't have to like search what's going on. You don't have to dig it. It does save you some time. But if after like one or two tries, it's just not getting it, I'm like, okay, I'll take over and run from there. And so, it's definitely and this is true for all of it right now, is like, what is the right balance? Because it's also like, I don't want it to do all of the work for me. Like, I tend to let it do stuff I'm just not that interested in. Like, I know it needs to get done, but it's not super complicated, and it can be a lot quicker if I just let it like run and do its thing. But when it comes to things like actually creating a decent looking app, like, most people say AI generates like nice looking UIs, but they look like Tailwind UI or whatever you call it. It is just stock Tailwind. There's no differentiating between anything that it creates. And that's actually another thing with Claude Code that I want to play with. And I've created it, but I haven't pushed on it at all, is, are you familiar with subagents?
Oh, yeah. Yep.
So I'm pushing on the idea of both like through brand guidelines, design files, stuff like that, creating kind of rules and like a design system that a bot can understand, and having a subagent that actually is like in charge of the design. So it's like, go through, check everything you've done as a designer and fix things based off of these rules, and like really trying to play with that. And like, I keep forgetting about subagents, so I haven't pushed on it too hard. But like yesterday I fixed a bug for a site, and I was like, oh, you know what I should do? I should just have Claude Code go in and write a regression test for it. Just so that it can, make sure that if this happens again, I know about it. And I actually had forgot, I created a subagent about a week ago that is essentially my test writer. And the point of it is like, as I create stuff, it should actually run periodically and kind of go in and like create those tests almost automatically as I go, to just fill in those blanks, because I've never been great at writing tests, but I need to get a lot better. And like, AI is a place where I think that can happen pretty nicely. But again, I've heard some horror stories where like AI will actually like mess with your code to make sure that the test passed, even if it's not right.
I was just going to say that I would agree in general. Yes. Like, that's a good place to even start with AI coding, is writing tests. But you need to be very explicit when you say write a test, and say something along the lines of, don't change anything but the test code. You still have to be very specific about it, because I've heard that same problem or thing, and it's just like, oh my God. But it also comes back to, you've got to be reviewing this stuff no matter what.
For sure.
Because you would catch that obviously in a review, but if you're just vibing it and you're not paying any attention, or you don't know any better, then you're going to be introducing lots of problems.
And that's such, it's such a hard thing because maybe you see people out there like, oh, I'm writing 10,000 lines of code every day now because of AI. And it's like, that's scary. Like,
That's a lot
how
of
are
code
you
to
reviewing
review.
10,000
That's a
lines
lot
of
of
code,
code.
every
Yeah.
day? Like,
Yep.
is that your job now? Like, are you just a code reviewer and you're going through every line? Or are you just like, yeah, I generated it, I'm good to go. Like, I'm done. And that just, because again, everything with AI that I have experienced is like, even when it's wrong, it is so damn confident about being wrong. It's just like, this is perfect. And it's not, like just even today with Claude Code, as good as it is, there's still times where it's like, well, no, I take that back. It was yesterday when it was doing the test writer for me. There were some issues with my test setup and it kept being like, okay, I fixed all the issues. We're good to go. And then it would just fail. And I'm like, did you though? And so I'd go back in and be like, oh yeah, no, I missed this one. And so you really like, yeah, it makes a lot of things easier, but it also makes things harder. And, I've heard there's the perception that AI makes you like 20% faster is like what everybody kind of says that they feel it is. But it turns out that the only people that actually makes 20% faster are people that actually know what they're doing or that are experienced. But the people that are actually inexperienced actually are 20% slower. Like it actually is bogging you down. And it makes perfect sense. Like I've seen it just from the loops it gets stuck in or the confidence that it has done something, but it really hasn't done something. And so you have to be wary of those things. Like it's not a reason to not use it by any means, but you have to know about it. Otherwise you're going to get yourself into trouble.
Yeah, exactly. I was trying to look, I thought I'd linked to something else that was similar to what you were talking about there, but I wasn't seeing it. So no big deal. But, yeah, I think that's a lot of good stuff, and maybe that's a good place to stop. Just kind of on that part. But I just want to check in if there's anything cool you wanted to share before we sign off here.
Yeah. So, and there's several of them out there now, but I just came across a tool called Mirage, which is essentially like a game engine generator using AI. And I know Google's created one, and I think there's like several other that are out there, but I'm really curious to see how that develops because like I've always wanted to build video games, but it's really freaking hard. So I've never dug into it that deeply, but it could be really interesting to be able to create, things in that realm without actually having to know exactly what you're like. We're going to do the vibe coding for video games without the experience. So we'll see how that goes. How about you?
Exactly. We'll be the perfect use case. Maybe not perfect. We at least could maybe understand some of the code, but we don't know the concept of game development.
For the most part, I would say over, how many years, 30 plus years of gaming, I've got an idea at least of what goes into it, but definitely not an expert.
Yeah, exactly. Well, the thing that I have got to cover here is sort of related. It's not building your own engine, but it is AI assistant. It's basically like Claude Code is my takeaway for Unity. And I was watching, I'm interested in game development as well. Like we've already established, I don't have any experience with it. I've been playing around a little bit, like just looking at different things and following like people that are doing it, like indie developers that have like YouTube channels. And I want to get his name right, so I'm just going to double check I got it here. But where is it? Thomas Brush, I think is his name. Of course, I didn't link to it directly, but Thomas Brush. So his YouTube channel, I think it's his name. I'll link to it just to be sure. But he was reviewing this thing called Bezi, which is, like I said, it from my interpretation and kind of watching him. So his video is cool. It kind of goes through like he's already a developer. He's already making games. I think he's got a couple maybe. And he had like 4 different things that he needed to do in his game. I think one was like, they were all kind of bug related or like small little things he wanted to get done. And so he was using this Bezi tool in the video to do it. And it was pretty cool, like not knowing a lot about game development, but just knowing how AI coding stuff works. Yeah. It works a lot in the same manners. And what I took away, like the difference between say like, using Claude Code with a React app or a Rails app and using it with something like a game is that this tool, at least from what I took away from it, it like actually takes into account all the assets you have too. So it's not just the code. And so one of the things that was really cool that he did was it was like he wanted a basically like an auto build tool for building a space for his character to play around in, and it like knew about all the assets, so it like took the assets and used them seemingly appropriately. It was really pretty cool. And not being a Unity developer at all, I was just kind of like, that would be fun to mess around with. Like I'm not going to build anything worth anything, but that seems really cool to kind of scratch that itch of, can I build something? not knowing hardly anything about game development.
That's actually super interesting. My son keeps pushing to teach him how to build video games, and
I know. I've been asked that forever. I think between you and I, like any kid that has found out that I know how to program, they're like, build me a video game.
Exactly. And it's like, no, I've got to learn how to do it first, and then so like, that would be interesting to get AI involved and see where we could push that.
Yep. Yeah, definitely. Cool. All right. Well, I feel like that's a good place to wrap it.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks for joining. We'll talk to you soon. See ya.